Explain the Berlin Conference.
The Berlin Conference was our colonizers' way of seeing to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. They came together in Berlin at the invitation of the then Chancellor of Germany, Bismarck, to divide up Africa.
1891? What was
November 1884 to February of 1885.
Got it.
They met and chopped up Africa into the tiny little economies that we see today. Economies that clearly cannot survive on their own. Economies that are easy to destabilize should they begin to look like they're having a leg up. Economies that will make it very difficult for these countries to trade with each other. You see, economic development is increased productivity from one production cycle to the other. If you interfere with the ability of countries to trade, you immediately mess with economic development. So that partitioning of Africa back in 1884 and those partitionings remain in place today is responsible for a lot of what has happened in Africa, our inability to grow our economies, our inability to travel from one country to the other. You look at tourism. If you need to go to Africa and visit 3 different countries, you got to send your passport to DC 3 different times. And each time your passport comes back, you got to send it again to another country, 2, 3, 4 weeks before you get your passport back. And then you got to send it back to Washington. At times, those embassies are on the same street. You could have walked from one embassy to the other, but you can't do it. And by the time you get your passport back with the 3rd visa, the visa for the first country is expired. Who needs to go through all that? So you say, forget it, I'm not going to Africa, I'm going to Europe. At every level, what we see happening today in Africa that affects economic development is directly related to what was done in 1884. You try to go from one part of Africa to the other. It's easier to fly into Europe and then come back down. Why? A lot of the airspaces were closed. All of it, thanks to the Berlin Conference. So people don't realize that that decision has everlasting implications on what goes on in Africa. And at the end of the day, it crystallizes down to our failure to grow our economies.